So as the snow continues to fall, looking out the window, I want to move from content to rhetorical analysis and try to break this up into segments since I'm not able to use the school uh, server to translate this. I'll probably have to rely on YouTube. But I want to hit the highlights on rhetorical analysis. And as you read over in the book, just to review, it has to do with text where you're looking at a significant speech event, maybe associated with a ritual. You think about rhetorical analysis, you may think about an inauguration ritual, a new president coming in, or a new leader in the organization. And this list of questions that I won't read all over completely, but each of those questions are meant to get you thinking more deeply about that particular speech event. The context is critical, and the purpose, the kinds of support that are used. In a rhetorical analysis, then, you're going further than what a person might do if they just sat in on the speech. An example I think about is when our president, our chancellor, Joel Anderson, stepped into his role as chancellor about 7 or 8 years ago. I was at that event. The context, it's not that often that a new chancellor comes on board, but in this case, city officials, state officials, congressmen, governors, others were there, all paying attention to what he had to say. He outlined his vision and his plan, and while a rhetorical analysis would easily pick up on all of that, what is significant is to follow that speech by looking at other speeches. So, for instance, one thing that he forwarded as one of his 3 major visions had to do with race relations. And with this language he used of that we need to face it to fix it. In other words, there was still progress that needed to be made on race relations. Well, future speeches, in fact, every year now occur just focused on that topic, and they occur in the context of a survey where his commitment has been to provide better information to the community about how we're doing with race relations. Well, that annual survey, the money put toward it, the speeches that happen every year, similar but differing audiences happen every year, can become important text for understanding a value set and what kinds of rituals and other cultural elements are present. For example, every week I'm around the table with the chancellor, with other faculty and staff in our organization. Those meetings have become rituals and indeed tied back to the significant speeches that are given every year. So rhetorical analysis is a powerful tool to give our attention to. Critical linguistic is this idea of identifying a small but culturally significant text where you analyze the language and grammatical patterns to reveal underlying system logic. That's a mouthful, but let me suggest this. Think about everyday language and everyday talk and how our language betrays whether or not we feel like we're empowered or perhaps being somewhat oppressed in a situation, whether we feel like the project is about us, a team, or just myself. So whether I'm using active or passive language, whether I'm using a plural inclusive language like we or us, or whether it's about individual activities. So critical linguistic analysis is meant to take us deeper in understanding what's going on in the life of an organization. If it's not already out there, I'll make sure I post the article that we referred to in the book where Angie looks at a significant text in an organization, specifically in the context of some power struggles in a church organization, and how in one ritual, by paying attention in a deeper way to the kind of language used, an individual is able to transform a ritual of confession to one where the congregation is more fully aware of some of the power dynamics. Critical linguistic, then, another method in your toolbox when you're doing textual analysis. In summary, it may be that you pay attention to we and I versus them and you, active versus passive verb use, or overuse or underuse of certain words. Consider the significance of what's said versus what's not said. I think that is perhaps even more important. What is missing? Are certain individuals, certain groups not included in the text? That's going to say something to you about the nature of the values in that organization. Is the organization focused on future, past, or present? And you're going to see different scholars that have attended just to those elements as a way of bringing attention to the kind of values and patterns of communication in the organization. So what we do after determining that critical text using one of those methods, content analysis, rhetorical, or critical, you begin to use your results to tie back to elements and to cultural significance. And we use the term triangulation with other data, and that is, as we're talked through the coming weeks, observations, interviews, surveys, textual analysis are going to be all coded so that you have examples of stories, heroes, values, history, all these different elements. You're summarizing that data by elements. You begin to identify cultural themes, and we'll be talking about cultural themes when we discuss interpretation, and that's going to lead you to some definition of the culture. What I've done in this one image here is captured and really foreshadowed where you're going. We talked last week, and again, if you've not taken time to read one of the articles, one of the papers that have already been written, take time to do that so that you can get a sense of the flow of where we're going. It's not a difficult process, but it certainly calls on you to pay attention to things that perhaps you haven't paid attention to and to be more systematic in your analysis process. The final thing is this notion of listing questions about confusing or contradictory issues. One of the major ways that they may show up is the values that are espoused versus the actual values in the organization. This example I give here on the screen of wireless services from AT&T, this vision statement that comes from a web page where you connect people with the world everywhere they live and work and do it better than anywhere else. And then a value set on teamwork, and then a value set on people. And yet this particular web page stands, some would say, in contradiction to policies and practices that don't show teamwork, that don't show a value on people, when AT&T was going through major shifts and changes in the economic environment. So the challenge of being able to sort through what an organization claims is important versus what it's not. Some of you are going to be looking at the paper based in an analysis of a church setting. And part of what he's able to do there is begin to explore questions that he has related to this issue of espoused versus actual values. So your turn. You're going to make sure in the assignment I gave you that you've decided some credible text. You're going to choose your method. You're going to think in terms of how you can surface elements from that method, elements of culture, and their significance to understanding that culture. And then you're going to practice this process of listing questions about things that are confusing. You're going to do it on a small scale to develop confidence as you move ahead. Again, let me stress, you may not be using textual analysis throughout your process of doing your project, but at least want you to get a feel for how to do it. So as we wrap up this discussion, I appreciate your flexibility on a snow day, and I hope you understand that to completely miss a class in a class where we only have 15 meetings is not the best idea. So I will be keeping in touch with you and look for emails as we get ready to move ahead on assignments. Check out Blackboard, and we'll talk to you soon.